Virtues set in stone, representation of power and authority in sculptures of Roman emperors. Power and authority are two influential tools that can work towards the good if the holder knows how to use them. Today, the world is still led by specific individuals that take control and manage a whole state. Whether they're presidents, monarchs, or dictators, people need to be aware of the power and authority they hold because they can change the path of an entire population. And for this, analyzing the sculptures of Roman emperors is the way to go. Augustus, Caligula, and Trajan make it to the list of the best or worst emperors. Their power and authority were showcased in their sculptures through their body posture, clothing, and additional details with symbolic meaning, including the response of the Roman people, and this can help to identify if they were good or bad leaders. The purpose of this presentation is to spread awareness about how influential the power and authority of leaders is. Also, to help people identify good leaders and ultimately encourage them to get involved in the future of their country by exercising the right to vote or demanding a good government. And I will begin my presentation with my methodology, then an analysis of the first sculpture, then the second sculpture, and the third sculpture. Then I will move on to the importance of this analysis and how to use the information we learn from it, and I will finalize with my conclusion. So without further ado, let's start with the methodology. For my methodology, I am using ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. He was a student of Plato and he studied many disciplines, among them logic, ethics, and politics. He carried out an analysis of various types of regimes, and this also allowed him to analyze the leaders and notice that a good leader should be holder of virtues that would make him worthy of being in a position of power. And this is one of the reasons why he wrote the book, The Nicomachean Ethics, a collection of treatises that explores topics such as virtues, ethics, society, and the goal of life, and also makes significant references to leadership. He states that political science is one of the most important sciences and also the most authoritative. He also states that the main goal of politics is to achieve the best of both ends, and the main concern of politics is to engender a certain character in the citizens and to make them good and disposed to perform noble actions. Also, he says that two concepts that play an important role in achieving the goal of politics is ethics and rhetoric. And according to Aristotle, ethics covers moral and intellectual virtues. So a good leader must be virtuous. An individual must have moral virtues in order to even develop intellectual virtues, Aristotle states. And a morally virtuous person must have four practices: justice, fortitude, temperance, and prudence. On the other hand, some intellectual virtues are philosophical understanding, reasoning, scientific knowledge, and practical understanding. Now let's analyze the sculptures of these Roman emperors to see if they are good or bad leaders. Let's start with a statue of Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. But first, who is Augustus? He was born on September 23, 63 BCE and died on August 19, 14 CE. His original name is Octavian, and he is the great-nephew, adoptive son, and heir of Julius Caesar. Also, he is the first emperor of Rome. During Augustus' reign, Augustus improved Rome's infrastructure, brought economic stability, and promoted morality. Some of the infrastructure improvements include the building roads, aqueducts, and sewers to provide clean water to the Romans. He also offered economic stability to the Romans by encouraging cultivation to create an economic industry and distributing funds and grains. Moreover, Augustus reflected his moral virtues and promoted morality. Under his ruling, marriage was legally required for everyone over 16, and sex outside of marriage was penalized, and having children was highly encouraged. He also promoted Roman religion via piety, which also includes worshipping Roman gods, being loyal to Rome, and lastly, Augustus would host parties and exotic public games to bring entertainment to Rome. And this period of time is known as Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. Now let's analyze this sculpture, Augustus de Prima Porta. This statue dated from the 1st century CE, and it is a three-dimensional statue made of white marble. It is about 2.03 meters high, and it has a naturalistic style. And we can see this in the pose, which is contrapposto, and this is meant to depict a relaxed human figure. But the most important aspect of his posture that demonstrates that he was a virtuous man is his hand in the air. And because a hand in the air is allegoric to being a good orator, which is one of the qualities a good leader should have. Moreover, the statue depicts Augustus with a metal armor on. The armor represents that he was a strong figure during wartime. One of the duties of an emperor was to command their soldiers and defend the empire in case of invasion or even during expansion and take over new territories. Since Augustus has his hand in the air and an armor, it is right to infer that he was depicted as a good commander and a good communicator with his army. The armor features a breastplate, with symbology referring to his divine right to the throne of Rome. The center of the breastplate shows an encounter between a Roman and a Parthian, in which the Parthian returns the military standard to Rome. This scene is meant to represent Augustus' victory against the Parthians. At the top of the breastplate are Sol and Kylus, who are the gods of the sun and the sky respectively. On the sides are female figures representing the countries Augustus annexed to Rome as he expanded this empire. They symbolize the Pax Romana, or the era of happiness and peace of Rome. Also, Augustus has a toga around his waist. Togas were typically garments worn by the working class of Rome. Augustus wearing a toga can symbolize empathy toward his people, giving the idea that he cared for them, again depicting a morally virtuous leader. Additionally, there's a baby Cupid next to his feet. Cupid is the son of Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. The placement of Cupid was strategically done to remind people that Augustus was also a descendant of the gods. The reason why Augustus would do this is to increment his credibility as the leader of Rome. These divine symbols would create the impact of assurance that he has the divine right and power given by the gods to be the emperor of Rome. After analyzing this sculpture of Augustus, we can conclude that he was a good leader because he is shown as a virtuous man. And we can say that because he is shown as a strong military figure, and political science being one of the most authoritative sciences, it also requires military management skills. Also, he's shown as a good orator, and having communication skills is part of the intellectual virtues explained by Aristotle. And also, we can tell that he cared for his people, as there are symbols depicting the Pax Romana, or the era of peace of Rome. Now let's continue to the second sculpture, a statue of Roman Emperor Caligula. But first, who is Caligula? He was born on August 31st, 12 BC, and died on January 24th, 41 BC. His original name is Gaius Caesar Germanicus, and he was the third emperor of Rome. He possessed a military background as his father was Germanicus Caesar, a general of the Roman military forces. Caligula had a military background because he grew up with his dad at the military camps, so he also received military training. After his father was supposedly poisoned by orders of Tiberius, the emperor at the time, and part of his family was exiled, Caligula was hiding. However, one day, Tiberius requested to see Caligula, so he went to Capri, the island where he was governing Rome from. And the reason why Tiberius wanted to see Caligula is because his oldest son had died, and his youngest son was still too young to be the next emperor of Rome. And this is how Tiberius appointed Caligula to be the next emperor of Rome alongside Gemellus, his youngest son. After Tiberius died, they had a good start as the emperors of Rome. However, after, Caligula became ill, and as a result, he thought that someone wanted to hurt him to take his place. So he started to kill everybody that would benefit from his death. And Gemellus, the one that was governing Rome alongside him, was forced to commit suicide. And at this point is where everything started to go down for Caligula's reign. Caligula had a bad economic management and also a lack of leadership skills. And we can see that in his sculpture, the equestrian statue of Caligula. It was built during the 16th century, and it is a three-dimensional statue made of white marble. and it is about 3.05 meters high, and it has a naturalistic style. When analyzing his pose, he has big eyes, and according to a study of it interpreting character from personal appearance in the ancient world, done by Elizabeth Evans, professor of classics, points out that Caligula was not a virtuous man. Her study says that big eyes indicate laziness, which is certainly not a virtue of a good leader. Also, when it comes to clothing, he is depicted naked, and that can be a sign of weakness. According to Jeffrey Hurwitz, who is a historian of ancient art at the University of Oregon, says that nudity was also used to show the defenselessness of a soldier, defeat, and even vulnerability. Although Caligula received military training and he had the power to control the armed forces of Rome, he was not often sculptured as a soldier. Another area where Caligula failed the Romans as their emperor was the economy. After his recovery, Caligula started to waste money on unnecessary things just to keep his luxurious lifestyle. He started to build monuments and ordered the making of sculptures of himself as a way of propaganda. He even went so far as to build two ships just to practice sexual orgies. All of the money Caligula was spending was not going towards the public good, but rather for personal whimsical. To maintain and afford all of these spendings, Caligula increased the taxation rates of the Romans. And after his reign ended, the Romans wanted to erase his memory due to the bad leadership he executed as emperor, so they evoked damnation memoriae, which means condemning memory. And they would do this to everyone that was seen as the enemy. In the way that the Romans would try to eliminate the memory of a person was through the damage or destruction of anything that would remind them of that person, including art. And that is the reason why there is an infinity amount of sculptures of Caligula, coins with himself with his face on it, or any article damaged, destroyed, broken, because people just didn't want to see his face. And just this reaction by the people can tell us that he was not a virtuous man. Up next is the statue of Emperor Trajan. He was born on September 18th, 53 CE, and died in 117 CE. He was the Roman emperor from 98 to 117 CE, and he also possessed a military background. He was son of Marcus Tyrannus, who was a very important military figure at the time. Trajan started to showcase his leadership skills at a very young age when he joined the armed forces as a tribune for his dad. He became a commander of the 17th Legion in northern Spain, and then he was offered a consulship, which is a very important title in government. At this point, Nerva, who was the emperor at the time, started to notice Trajan's potential, so he was appointed to be the following emperor. During Trajan's reign, there was prosperity, and also he expanded the territory. And also, he showed his care for the people with a program called Alimenta. In his sculpture, Emperor Trajan, we can see some of his skills. It was built in 103 CE, and it is made of marble, and it also has a naturalistic style. We can see it has various similarities to Augustus de Prima Porta. It also has a contrapposto pose, and by the pose of the sculpture, we can infer that the hand was in the air. Again, trying to tell us that he was a good orator. Thus, he is shown as a strong military figure and has a breastplate. In it, there is a 3D scene of the Amazon or female warriors fighting two griffins. This feature is highly symbolic because it makes reference to the war in the Roman frontiers, which in expanding the territory is one of the characteristics of Trajan's time. Furthermore, there is another thing that stands up, which in his reign, which is his prioritization for the well-being of the Romans, since he implemented a program called Alimenta, intended to support children from underdeveloped places in situations of need. And also, he was named Optimus Princeps by the Senate, which means best ruler, and this noble action tells us that he was a virtuous man. Best ruler, and this noble action from the people tells us that he was a virtuous man. Now let's move on to the importance of this analysis and how to use it. It is important to analyze the sculptures of Roman emperors because it can teach us what a good and a bad leader does. Now we know and we can compare a good leadership and a bad leadership. We also learned the virtues that these leaders had, and now we can look for these virtues in our current leaders today. How can we apply this? As part of a population, it is our job to choose and encourage our leaders to aim for the highest happiness of human good. So now that the people know how to identify a good leader, they can pick their best option by exercising their right to vote or simply demanding a good government. In conclusion, we went over the leadership philosophy of Aristotle and we applied it to three different sculptures of Roman emperors, and we found out that Augustus and Trajan were virtuous leaders. However, Caligula was not a virtuous leader. We also learned the importance of leadership and how it impacts our life. And finally, we learned how to identify a good leader and a bad leader. Thank you. These are my references.